26 to 10, and this is 12:33 ABC Newcastle. Thanks for having us on at your place today. How inclusive do you think your kids' or grandkids' school is? Does it cater for all their needs? Well, this week the New South Wales government announced that they've added an extra 260 support classes in New South Wales public schools this year and a $100 million investment to improve classroom and school accessibility for students living with disability. So how are we looking here in the Hunter? Dr. David Roy is a disability advocate and lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle and joins us with his thoughts today. David, hello.
Great to be here, Paul, in the studio.
We seem to change our approach to education fairly frequently. It's kind of, I imagine, for someone that's been in and analysed the industry for as long as you have, is there kind of a roller coaster between inclusion and exclusion where the principles and philosophies around how we try to educate all of our children seem to change?
Yeah, it's been changing. A significant change happened in the early 2000s with a thing called the Salamanca Statement, when we realised that we needed to be much more inclusive, and we took that on board, and we now have children with disabilities in the mainstream school. But we're now moving in another kind of arc, as you were saying, where we're kind of separating many of those kids out from the mainstream classroom into units or eventually into separate schools, SSPs, because the mainstream isn't built for children with a disability. It's a 100-year-old structure, and we're trying to shoehorn people in
rather than the shoehorn. Is it a bell curve? Are we missing at the top end as well? You know, the gifted and talented kids, are they catered for adequately?
Well, they're also separating them out into separate units and also into specialist schools. And yeah, we're really not supporting the different ends of the school spectrum and trying to see if we can just support those in the middle, the average. And it's just not working. And the problem we've got is when we start to create separate units, if it's not a transition that's temporary but becomes more of a permanent thing, it starts to create isolation in the school, which leads to people being isolated in the community and for their whole life. So it's a problem, but it's a nuanced problem, because at the same time, kids need support. All kids need to get help within their learning, and a support unit can do that. So in the kind of structure we've got, it's working for those kids, but it's not the ideal structure, and we maybe need to think about a much bigger picture of changing the way we school in the first place.
Okay, so how do we, if we were starting from scratch, how would we do that? Is average? We hesitate to use the word normal in contemporary society these days. If we were using a mode of or a method of central tendency, I don't know which one would be appropriate in education.
Yeah. Your average kid. Let's talk about your average kid. So yeah, we are targeting towards them. Would I do something very different? I'd rip the whole system up. Firstly, we're struggling to get teachers. It's not an attractive occupation to go to. It's underpaid, it's overworked, they're overburdened with admin, so they can't do what they want to do. So
if you like being a secretary or a clerk, it's a great profession, isn't it?
It can be, but even then it's very tedious, and the expertise that the teachers have. And I just want to state from the start, we criticise schools and we condemn them. The staff who work in schools work incredibly hard, are incredibly caring, and want to do the best for all the kids that are there. But they're limited by the system structures. And it's to do with money, it's to do with lack of resourcing, buildings. We make big schools because they're cheaper to run. And when you make big schools, then kids fall off the edges because they don't get their needs met. They're not seen as individuals. They're part of a whole conglomerate. So one of the things I think would work better would be much smaller schools with more smaller classes, so the teachers could spend more one-on-one time with the kids and actually be given time to prepare for them.
Ka-ching, ka-ching.
Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And also the way that we as people view schools and staff, because too often as parents or the community, they kind of want to dump the kids in the school and say, great, that's them away for 6-7 hours and we're free. And they become glorified kind of babysitting services and attitude from the parents and from the community. We've got to lift the respect for schooling and make it high on the agenda, and maybe think of our schools as more important than more Tomahawk missiles for the Ministry of Defence.
Yeah. I've got a retired chalk. He lives under, I don't know whether you can say that anymore because I don't know the last time chalk was ever evidenced in the classroom, but I have a retired teacher who lives under the same roof as me. And one of the issues has always been about the obligation that society wants to place on schools and the expectations that the school is a panacea for all of our social ills.
And the school is just part of the bigger picture. We've got to look at the way that what wages are, housing, access in the community, jobs, all of these things fit together to create a sense of mental well-being for the community. It's not just the school's responsibility to fix that. But getting back to the kids with a disability, we're not meeting their needs. And that's why they're creating more units within schools, because there's a demand for it from parents. It's a kind of a Hobson's choice for the parents because they don't have any other option. The other thing that we're also seeing a rise of is people being taken out of school and homeschooling. It's a year ago, it was rising by 39%. The last statistic that came through, it's homeschooling has increased by 6% or so. And one of the largest groups of people doing that are families with a disability. So we're not meeting their needs.
Yeah, okay. And it's important, of course, the socialisation aspect is important as well. Really. It's not just about education, is it?
And that's part of the problem I've got with the units. I mean, the units are there to help them curricular-wise, but you're also cutting them off from the rest of the school community. So long as those kids in the units are being involved in the wider school community events, and there are schools that are in the Hunter that are doing that, quite often they might be independent schools or in the Catholic sector because they can afford to do that. They also see that they're smaller. Most of the independent and Catholic schools are, so they can actually have a better community sense. But yeah, the socialisation is really, really important because that's where many of these kids are actually lacking in skills and involvement, and that's why they're getting isolated.
Regardless of the system that you implement, there will be cracks and there'll be kids falling through it. So what about the constant complaint we hear about parents that too much time is being dedicated to those and kids with special needs are being under-resourced in the mainstream? What are your observations about that?
So there's a kind of a myth that, there's more time being spent on those kids. My kids aren't getting enough. I've yet to see that actually in a reality in a school, that kids are being supported across the board. If you look at the data, it's actually kids with a disability who are being left behind and not getting the full support that they need, despite the best efforts. And I'm going to reiterate it, despite the best efforts of the staff. The staff are trying to do the best, and we should never blame that for them for this. We just need to rethink the way we run schools. And again, it comes to that one-on-one teaching or that small group teaching that will support them. We know that all kids have learning needs. And the support units were originally being created to help kids, maybe with their literacy or their numeracy. But we now seem to find it a bit too easy. Just let's push this group of kids who are in the too hard basket, put them in a separate unit and see what we can do there, rather than say, what do we need to change in the classroom to really help them?
Do we have a capacity within our system to fade kids with special needs, whether they are gifted or whether they're living with a disability? Whether we can fade them in and out of mainstream, for want of a better expression?
Absolutely, we've got that potential to do that, but it also comes down to the attitude of the school, and it's the principal. And the Auditor General's reports, both in 2016 and the 2024 one that came out last year from New South Wales, keep saying that it's attitudes that make the difference in a school and in a system. And you see the change when a new principal comes and either suddenly kids are being better supported or they're suddenly not being supported. So we've got to look at the leadership as well and realise that the kids who are having challenges in schools, they've also got abilities within those schools, because you find anyone with a disability, they often find ways to get a strength because they have to fight through the barriers they keep coming across. So we've got to also look at not just the deficit that kids have and they need support, but the asset that they can also bring to other kids within the classroom.
260 support classes and $100 million. It's never a bad thing when the politicians throw money at education, is it?
So long as the money is actually being used properly, we can throw money everywhere and not get results. So we've got to look at it and say, are we measuring the outcomes for kids with a disability? And at the moment, they're not really doing that. They've always been left slightly on the side. There is an improvement happening. I do meet with Murat Dizdar, the boss of the department, regularly and chat about these things. And he is trying to get better measurement of what the outcomes are happening so they can target and do things in a stronger way. Next year, one of the whole school professional development days for every public school teacher in New South Wales will be purely for one day on disability support. So they are trying to do something and they are making changes, and I've got to give them credit for that. I just wonder whether or not, given announcements federally from people like Mark Butler, if we're just still got ableist attitudes coming in that are going to be sticking plasters, not really fixing things.
Do we measure outcomes with NAPLAN, or do we look what's in the school lunchbox at how healthy our kids are, how well they're conversing with fellow students, how they're sharing, how they're interacting?
I think you've actually hit the nail on the head. That's much more important. With NAPLAN, many kids with a disability don't actually take part in it. It's optional. We know of lots of instances at schools that the kids might attend the school when NAPLAN's happening, but they'll just be moved to another room and not really actually undertake it. So NAPLAN doesn't give an accurate result of how kids with a disability are doing. And also the way that NAPLAN is actually undertaken, for some kids with a disability, they can't access it properly, so it can't actually say what they're doing. So, yeah, I think we've got to look at how are they communicating, how are they socialising. Teachers are much better experts than a NAPLAN result, which takes 6 months to a year to actually state, oh, that's where they were a year ago. So NAPLAN is deeply flawed in multiple ways, and I'm not a fan, I'll just say.
David, as you know, I like a feisty text. Here's one from Helen. I'm sick of teachers whining. They know the conditions of the position before they start. I chose my profession, which was in health. I knew my conditions of employment, including 4 weeks annual leave, not 12 weeks. That'll rile up teachers. There are other jobs more difficult than teaching, but most don't whinge en masse like teachers do. As the old saying goes, if it's too hot in the kitchen, get out. The problem with teachers is that they have never left the classroom since they were 5. Oh, there's Helen.
That's a strong statement. I get that viewpoint, Helen. The one thing I would state is teachers are doing a company presentation 6 times a day, 5 days a week without the preparation. But if you go to a company that's maybe doing a presentation, they'll set aside a month to prepare for it. So you've got to realise that teachers can't just create a lesson and repeat it every year, because the kids are different and the way they respond are different. So teachers work incredibly hard. I was there for 17 years as a teacher in the classroom. Hardest job I've ever done. I have to say, much harder than my current role in the university. And I don't regret a moment of doing that, but it was really challenging and difficult. And I did quite well in it. I got great results from my kids. I got promoted and all that kind of stuff. It's a draining job emotionally, because you're dealing with all these kids who are so individual that you've got to target everything, and differentiate for every single one of them.
David, thanks for coming in. Always good to catch up. Thank you. There's Dr. David Roy, disability advocate and lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle, just reflecting on some proposed changes at the state government level to education. 13 to 10.